Being in this box with a microphone is actually weird for me. I usually sit on the chair and I walk around, so this is going to be a little awkward. I'm going to apologize up front. But look, so I grew up here. I grew up in Boston. Went to school down in Maryland. Drank my way through 4 years of college there. Just out of curiosity here, anybody got their degree in sales by any chance?
I think I do.
Yeah, you think you do, right? It still drives me crazy that this is the #1 profession on the planet, and yet none of us are actually formally taught how to do it, right? Like, I got my degree in marketing because I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I got out of school and I realized, ooh, I don't want to do this. And I can't make enough money doing this to get paid and pay my bills back. So most people just kind of fall into sales, right? And we don't get that education, which kills me because this is the #1 profession on the planet. Like I said, nobody gets taught how to do it formally. We learn through osmosis. We learn by just doing shit. And the cool part about it is that we get through it through persistence and all that other stuff, but we develop a lot of bad habits along the way. And that's what got me, is like, as soon as I developed so many bad habits along the way. And then when I started taking trainings, I started realizing, okay, this shit works and this shit doesn't work. And so I grew up, so I started with DeWalt power tools, driving around, giving away construction tools to people. It was fun. And I sold copiers. Anybody here sell copiers by any chance?
I did.
How long did you last?
3 months.
3 months, all right. Anybody else? All right, copier sales, you're either in and out of copiers, so like, congrats for getting out, right? Because you're either in and out in less than 2 years or you're in it for the rest of your life. Because talk about selling a commodity. It's like, oh, 45 pages a minute over 42 pages a minute, but ooh, it scans to email, right? Shit. So anyways, I did that for 1.5 years, and then I started a company. It was an agency, basically. It was Thrive Networks. We did outsourced IT support for small, mid-sized companies as opposed to outsourced sales support for them. And I grew that up, and I had no idea what I was doing. So I took every training, Sandler, Miller, Hyman, Taz, Spin, all of it. And I came across this one crew called Basho, and I loved it because it was super tactical. So I used it. We helped grow Thrive up. We sold it off to Staples. We were the fastest growing company in Massachusetts for about 3 years in a row. And then Staples came and bought us. And then come to find out, apparently I'm not a corporate guy. I don't have much of a filter, and I really don't like playing politics. So after a little while, Staples offered me another position. They fired me. And I was looking for a job, and Basho said, John, you want to be a trainer? I was like, absolutely not. And they're like, why not? I'm like, I don't like trainers. I'm like, why not? I'm like, because most trainers, up until that point in my career, I'd met plenty of sense, but either failed sales professionals or professional presenters. Ever been through a training, you could tell the trainer's never actually done what they're telling you what to do? Or if they did it, it was like 20, 30 years ago back in my day, and they're wearing a suit that's 3 sizes too big and doing a role play that fucking nobody would ever do in real life. Like, I didn't want to be that guy, and they said, don't worry, you have to use these techniques to sell so you can train so you can pay. And I was like, all right, I like the whole practice what you preach thing, right? So I joined Basho, took on some bigger accounts, brought on some bigger ones, and then to make a very long story short, they screwed it all up and I took it over. So I went off on my own about 10 years ago now, and I'm playing around with some of these cool companies. Most of them I've gotten by using the techniques that I train on, and most of them have standardized on some way, shape, or form. But what I'm here to talk about today is out of all that evolution that I've been watching, I've been talking about the death of the average sales rep, and by the way, the average sales rep. That's an important distinction. 2017. So I used to train on one very specific technique. It was called the why you now email, right? Which was about going on somebody's website, doing some research, being hyper Frank Vander whatever his last name is, the VP of sales and the CMO of Salesforce. And that's how we got in. So back then, it was worth spending 15, 20, 30 minutes writing emails because you were getting that type of response rate. But then back in 2015, 2016, we started to see the cadence tools, right? The sales lofts, the outreaches come out, and they started just littering the C-suite with this messaging. And so you started to see individual messages starting to die. And then it became the contact strategy, right? Then in 2017, I got a little bit of a wake-up call because a couple of kids who worked at Salesforce, they left Salesforce, and they said, John, we created this artificial intelligence bot that creates super highly personalized emails at a fraction of the time as sales reps. We want to show it to you. And I was like, yeah, whatever. I was like, fine, yeah, give me a sample, right? Give me an example. What they showed me back then in 2017, I had a heart attack. I was like, what? And I asked, like, wait, there was no human involvement in writing this thing? And they were like, no human involvement other than picking the article to use from our app. And oh, by the way, it took 70 seconds to write. And I was like, shit. And so I remember, you all know Gary Vaynerchuk? Anybody follow Gary V, right? So he has this thing where you can go to his 4D session where you go to his office and you sit down, you spend like 10 grand, you sit down with his office with all his executives and you and like 10 other entrepreneurs. And all those executives come in and they share with you what they're doing with the biggest brands in the world and everything else. And Gary comes in at the end, he does a Q&A with you. And so that's right when I saw that email and I asked him, I said, Gary, I just saw a robot write an email better than I ever could and better than a rep ever could, and I've been doing this for years. Where does that leave us as sales professionals? And he goes, don't worry about that. He's like, you're not going to beat the machines. Don't try to beat them. He goes, you got to be the last mile. And that stuck with me since then. He's like, let the machines do all the heavy lifting, but let them do all the research. Let them write the fucking emails. Let them come up with that cadence. But before you hit send, make sure you humanize it. Because there's always going to be that piece. Because as long as humans are still buying from humans, we got a shot. But, and that's not, as soon as robots start buying, that's when we're screwed, by the way. But as long as there's a human buying some shit, we are at that shit. But we have to evolve here. Because what worked before is just not working right now. And so, I mean, this is what we've done to the sales process. And correct me if I'm wrong. And I put a post out there recently because I'm relaunching my personal brand for this very specific reason. Because we've been lazy as shit in sales for the past 10 years. Lazy as shit. Well, we've gotten lazy, I'll tell you that. Because we've gotten away with blasting, like this is our model right now. Tell me if I'm wrong with this, especially in the SaaS industry. We got SDRs, right? And we don't even let SDRs have the autonomy to write emails anymore. Most of the time, most of the clients that I work with, they actually have their marketing team create messaging that gives to SDRs to then push play on their fucking cadences. First of all, what kind of job satisfaction is that? Second of all, marketing can't write sales-ready messaging, period. I'm sorry, my background's marketing. Marketing doesn't have a fucking clue how to write messaging that will fit on one scroll of an iPhone or on a 10-second what do you do conversation, right? The elevator pitch, shit. Anybody have a great elevator pitch that they want to stand up here and profess to the crowd because it's so awesome? So I'll prove to you that I made, so when I was at Thrive, my first company, like I thought I was like 23 years old and I had no idea what I was doing. So I figured, and I knew I wasn't good at anything, so I figured I'd just have a stronger work ethic and I could work harder than anybody else. So I figured out my equation. I knew exactly what my equation was. I needed to make $1,600 a month to get $400 to get 8 meetings a month, to get 4 proposals, to get 2 pieces of closed business, average deal size of $3,500. That was my equation. And if you back that out, $1,600 a month to get 8 meetings a month. Do you know what that conversion ratio is? That is a 0.5% conversion rate, not a 5% conversion ratio, a 0.5%. So I just figured I'd come up with that and go to work, right? Because that's what I could do. And I came up with my elevator pitch, and man, I thought it was it. Right? And I would just make it rain, right? And I'll prove it to you. This is the voicemail that I left 399 times a week for 5 years. Ready? This is how it went. And I am not reading anything. I will even take off my glasses here because I can't see shit without it. Ready? This is the voicemail that I left 399 times a year for 5 years of my life. It went something like this. I'm sorry. It went exactly like this. Hi, this is John Barrows with Thrive Networks. We do outsourced IT support for small to mid-sized companies in the Boston area. We take a really unique approach to manage your IT infrastructure by combining the best of what people and technology have to offer. We tie our network operations center and our managed services to your environment so we can take care of all the small things on a proactive basis. So when the engineers come on site, they can take care of the high-level, more strategic initiatives that help drive your business forward. I'd love to talk to you about your IT support needs. If you could call me back at 617-529-7271. This is John Barrows with Thrive Networks, 617-529-7271. And ooh, was I proud of that. I would leave that voicemail, I'd be like, like nailed it again. Like pitch, tone, everything was perfect on that one, right? And then I started looking at my numbers. I was gonna damn call back. I would get more callbacks when I would screw up a voicemail than I would nail the I did this one by mistake one time. I was like, this is John Barrows with Thrive Networks. We do outsource IT to put shit. Look, I'm sorry, I was trying a new pitch there. That was a disaster. Look, we fix computers. You got problems with your computers, call me back. I got more callbacks with that approach. So I started doing it on purpose. So, I mean, but with that, right, we've turned these kids into robots, period. Because all these reps do. By the way, when I say kids, that's a Boston thing. I apologize. You could be 50 years old. I'll call you a kid, so it has nothing to do with your age. I apologize for that up front. But they're sending out these templated cadences, and I get these. I can almost tell if I'm on a sales loft cadence or an outreach sequence at this point. I can almost tell the difference. Because when companies sign up for these tools, they go to sales loft or outreach and say, hey, could you give us like your best performing cadence just so we can see what it looks like, right? And then they'll give it to them, and then they'll just take sales loft's name off, they'll put their name on, they'll tweak it, and they'll just fucking press play. And I get like, hey, we're leading provider of, did you get my first email? Bubbling this one up to the top. Why aren't you responding? And then the stupid breakup email, 1, 2, 3, stuck under a rock type of crap. And please, if you're doing that right now, stop it. 1, 2, 3, all right. And then the handoff between SDRs and AEs is a disaster. And then AEs go through their demos, and good Lord, do I hate demos. I think demos are my least favorite part of the entire sales process. You know why? Because they're all exactly the same. I go through probably 3 or 4 demos on a weekly basis. And they all go something like this, right? They'll pick up the phone and say, hey, John, is this still a good time? I got some pet peeves. If I pick up the phone for a scheduled call, why would you ask me, is this still a good, why would you give me that out? Actually, you know what? I got to go to the bathroom right now. Why don't we push this to, now what you want to do is you want to say, hey, do we still have 30 minutes? Like, do we have a hard stop at 2 o'clock? That's what I want to say, because I do need to know that, because if you have a hard stop, your brain's right. But is this still a good time? Okay, John, look at about a 30-minute demo here that I'd like to go through with you. And if you have any questions as we go through it, just let me know. Okay. Right? And then they press play and they go through every fucking slide like they were badged for in boot camp, right? And they pause intermittently and go, does that make sense? Does that make sense? Does that? Anybody ever said no to that question, by the way? And anybody ever been like, wow, what you just said there blew my mind, right? But it makes us feel good so we can get our badge, right? Get our fucking boot camp. And at the end of one of those canned piece of shit demos, you always get that nice little parting gift. And by the way, if you ever hear this word at the end of one of your demos, you know you've done a miserable job, and it's the word digest. And you know you've heard it before because it usually goes something like this. You know what, John, it sounds interesting. I need a little time to digest what you just told me right there. Why don't you circle back in a couple weeks? We'll take it from there. Does that sound fair? If you ever hear that, stop and apologize to the person that you just wasted their time. It is our job to help them digest the information. If they walk out of the conversation more confused than they were walking in, we've done a terrible job. But yet, that's what we do all day, every day. Oh, and then we flip it over to customer success, and they're no better. That handoff is broken. The customer doesn't even know why they bought the shit, and neither does the customer success person. And then they go through their QBRs, which are completely pointless. And then they go, hey, your renewal's coming up in 90 days, your renewal's coming up in 60 days, your renewal's coming up in 30 days, here's a massive discount, please, please, please renew. That's the sales process. And then we got marketing up there. In sales and marketing, I've been in sales and marketing. I've got a marketing degree, and I've been in sales for 27 years. It's been broken since I got in, and it's still broken to this day. And then we got the customer down here, and they're going all over the place. They don't follow a linear sales path. I love the linear sales stages these days. It's like, go from this stage to this stage. So you think the client goes through a linear buying process? Give me a break. And then we got social. That's fun. And we wonder why reps don't want, clients don't want us involved. This is actually brand new data from Gartner, by the way. They averaged out millennials, Gen X, and baby boomers. You know Gen Z is coming up, and it's going to be even worse. 43%, B2B, 43% want a rep-free experience. That is the bad news. It gets a little worse, and I'll tell you why it gets better. It gets even worse when we introduce shit like this. Like, I don't know if you guys are really playing around with this stuff, but if you're not, you better fast. I think I'm irrelevant right now. I'm not joking, and I'll tell you why. My designers, like my AV guy, he was playing around with some AI, free shit too. You want to see what he built? So me, John Barrows, I got a brand, right? People like me. I'm smart. No, I'm not. But people think, well, look at this guy. Oh, I got it on mute. Hold on.
Top sales training professional.
Whoops.
Staying ahead of the curve when it comes to the latest trends in technology and sales. And I have some great news.
Yeah, you can't hear it, but.
AI is poised to revolutionize the way we approach sales.
Yeah, that's all right.
We're in a perfect position to take advantage.
But you can't hear it all that well? That's my voice. And I didn't tell it to do any of this, and it's going on for a minute. But all he did was take my podcast, put it in there, ingest it into this AI model, And he said, hey, do a 1-minute overview of what John Barrows thinks of what generative AI is going to do to the sales industry. I mean, not exactly me, but that's with free shit, and that's today. You can't tell me in 6 months that's not going to look exactly like me, and it's going to have all my information in it, and it's actually going to be Super John. Because you know why? Because not only will it ingest my stuff and all my content, but all of a sudden you can put all Miller Hyman's content in there, all Sandler's content in there. So all of a sudden, you got Super John AI that you can ask at any time, at any place, any question, and it'll give you a better answer than I would. Fuck. Right? So we can either run away from this stuff or we can adopt it and adapt to it, right? Anybody ever see the movie? I was saying this the other night. Anybody ever see the movie Hidden Figures? Right? The NASA movie? If you haven't seen that movie, it's a great movie. I highly recommend you watch it because there's women were called the computers at NASA, and they were physically doing math to help us get to the moon. And then all of a sudden NASA implemented this, or they invested in this huge IBM mainframe. And one of the leaders of the computers saw this thing and said, oh my God, that's going to replace us. And she had two choices, right? She could say, hey, we got to get smarter because we're going to beat that thing. Or I can figure out how to manage. I can figure out how to maintain and run that thing. And that's what she did. And so then when they turned it on, because she did that and then she trained all of her computer friends how to do it. So when they turned this machine on, even the IBM people couldn't use it, but they could. So they went from being replaceable 100% to being irreplaceable because they were the ones that would manage it. And that's what I think the opportunity is for us here today, is that there's going to be about 20% of the people that figure this stuff out and figure out how to leverage it, and agencies, and how to be super efficient with this. I do think we're in the world right now of smaller companies with massive profitability being able to do way more with way less. Right? Think about all the VC, right? Why do you need VC funding, right? Well, I got to build an SDR team. I got to hire engineers. I got to do all this stuff. No, you don't. You can run a $3 to $5 million business with 2-3 people and some pretty legit AI playing around with this stuff. And I think that's what us as agencies need to bring, because I do think that right now with what I'm watching in the SaaS industry, I've talked to 50 CROs in the past 2 to 3 months, and that's not even an exaggeration. And every single one of them has either gotten rid of their SDR team, significantly restructured it, or is thinking about getting rid of them or significantly restructuring it. Because the model just doesn't work as a full-time employee anymore. It did when you scaled. When your SDR was building the future future AE, it made all the sense in the world. But now SDRs, especially in San Francisco and all these tech companies, they stay 9 months, right? So you're going to invest all this money into somebody that's supposedly supposed to be your future sales rep, and they're going to bounce on you in less than a year. Doesn't make any sense from a business model standpoint. So that's why I think outsourcing comes into play here. And that's what I'm recommending to a lot of my clients is let's have somebody else do it in a way more efficient way. But then the step down from that is AI. And so if we as agencies don't figure out how to leverage the AI to then augment what we're doing, we're just going to be the next step in the replacement phase here. And so that's why I believe, but this is what I was saying, the good part is 43% of people don't want a rep. But for the people that did buy without a rep involved, they had a 23% higher regret rate. That means there's room for us in sales. It's just different. It's just different. It's no longer droning through PowerPoint presentation, asking dumbass BANT questions, any of that shit. It's about bringing value at every single level, getting people to think, and asking yourself, quite frankly, and this is a harder question to answer every day, which is what can you do that a computer can't? That's a hard question to answer right now. Curiosity, business acumen, emotional intelligence, those are the things that I'm telling reps to double down on right now. Because the skills, especially to get meetings these days, those are going to be automated. Those are going to be automated real quick. And I do think we're going back to full cycle sales eventually pretty quick here, as a matter of fact. So another bonus for us is, this came out from Corporate Executive Board, that the key drivers of customer loyalty, and this is the actual sales experience. It's not company and brand impact, product and service delivery, value to price ratio. It is the sales experience. So the experience the client has with us is the main driver for why they make the choice. And that starts with that initial call they get from that SDR. That starts with that initial email that they get. So if that initial email is not relevant, it's not personalized, it's a total bullshit marketing email basically, that's the first impression they get of our brand. That's why the SDRs have to have brands. That's why we have to unleash the SDRs to build their own personal brands. Like, I don't understand companies that hold back their SDRs from posting and stuff like that on whatever you want to post on, by the way. I mean, as long as it's not, super offensive, whatever. But you're sitting on 10 people, say you got a 10-person SDR team. That is 10 people that could be your marketing megaphone. And I don't mean because your dumbass marketing materials that you're trying to push out there to everybody. I mean just brand in general of those people, because you have to have that brand. I went back to work, so back in January, bottom fell out, right? All my clients are SaaS, all of them. Bottom fell out. Clients went away, disappeared. I had to restructure everything. I also had to get back to work. So I actually, I've always sold, but selling, is relative, right? But hardcore selling? Shit. I haven't done that in a while. So I was like, okay, all right, threw my CEO hat off and put my sales hat back on. I went to work. Ended up generating 49 meetings for myself in February, 49. 70 in Q1. And a lot of people were like, well, John, that's because of your brand, you're John Barrows. I was like, yeah. And that's why I fucking built it. Because that's what the rep of the future is gonna need. You're gonna need a personal brand to have some credibility. You're gonna need to know how to prospect. And by the way, that wasn't all just because of my brand. I went to work, I learned how to prospect. I tell people all the time that I think prospecting is the #1 skill that you should develop as a business owner, as a sales professional, because if you ever want to rely on somebody else for your success, good luck with that, right? So I know how to sell. I know how to prospect, and that's why I can get out there and do it, and do it when I have to, right? So this is why I think we have a chance here. We can add value. People need us, but it's just they don't need us the traditional way that we've built this whole process out. We've over-engineered the sales process. We've we've used technology to try to optimize this shit, and we've forgotten about the fundamentals. A lot of these reps don't even know how to have conversations right now. Because they're also, not even the fact that they're not getting the training, but they're also getting into a remote world. I at least had the benefit when I was getting into sales, I sat in a bullpen. And I could listen to my colleagues, and I could pick up on stuff through osmosis and shit like that. Like, I didn't get a lot of good training, but man, I could hear somebody over there being like, damn, that was good. Let me try that. I also did face-to-face meetings, so I could watch full body language, not just this, right? And I could see when you squidged in your chair and when I said something dumb. You know what I mean? I could watch CEOs literally check out of the conversation when I was talking to them, right? Now, you know how good I am at pretending I'm paying attention to you if you're doing a demo for me? Oh man, I am so fucking good, right? Because as soon as you go into presentation mode, you know what I do? I take my email, I kind of scroll, I bring it right under your eyeballs, right? And I just sit there, I'm like, oh yeah, this is brilliant. Oh, this is fucking, I'm paying tons of attention to that. This is great, right? Shit. You know what I mean? So we gotta level up here. We gotta level up. And now this is where we can. This is where AI comes into play, and this is why I encourage all of you to pay attention to right now, because you hear this stat all the time of how much time a sales rep actually spends selling, right? And it's all over the place, but this is the new one from Salesforce. This just came out with their sales report, that only 28% of a rep's time is spent actually selling, okay? The rest of that stuff is, especially this stuff, look at every point on that and tell me you can't automate that with AI. That's what we need to focus on. We need to focus on all these little nuanced pieces to give the reps the time back so they can sell, but we also give them the skills so they can sell with that time. Job satisfaction. How much job satisfaction a rep has selling 28% of the time? Right? How much satisfaction does a rep have? Why do you think they only last 9, 10, 11 months when they're just doing this? How long would you want to sit in your job if your job is just to go, let me fucking sell my 100 cadences today, boss. Like, yay, can't wait to come back to work tomorrow. Like, fuck. Let me make 100 cold calls and get told no 1,000 times. You know what I mean? Like, we gotta figure out ways to put reps in a better position to be successful here. And this is where what I'm encouraging everybody to do, and you'll see this, is, look, this is where I think we're headed right now, it's like Minority Report. Anybody see that one? Minority Report, right? So, but we're gonna be all sitting in front of a dashboard going back to full cycle sales where SDRs and BDRs are gonna roll up under marketing and operations, and they're gonna be doing a lot of like the work to get that intent data, to get people, right? Because we all need to be mini marketers right now. We all have to be mini marketers. That's why you have to show up on social. That's why you retweet somebody. That's why you comment. That's why you still leave a voicemail. Like some reps all the time, like John, why even make phone calls at this point? Nobody picks up, nobody leaves voice, nobody calls me back. Well, no shit. But that's not the reason I'm making cold calls. The reason I'm making cold calls and leaving voicemails is because when I do that and I compare it to an email-only cadence versus a cadence that has phone and voicemails in it, I usually get a 15 to 20% higher overall conversion ratio on the cadence. And it's because it's a touch point, right? They see us, they hear us, all this other stuff, and all of a sudden that might be like, ooh, you know what, I remember that email, let me go check that back, and then all of a sudden that person hits back. It's why inbound and outbound, I think, have to come together as well. Because how can you dictate all the work that the SDRs do, and then all of a sudden an inbound lead comes in? How do you attribute that, right? I mean, we used to do that all the time, and all of a sudden I would get inbound leads, like Morgan, who used to work with me, he would do a ton of outbounds, and then all of a sudden I would get the inbound lead. And it would be from a company he'd be going after, but it would not be the person that he was going after. But you cannot tell me that all that outbound work that he did didn't drive somebody to tell somebody to go look at us and then come to us the way they wanted to. And so that's why we have to orchestrate all of this and prepare the team to make sure that they have the skills to do the stuff that we need them to do now in this transition phase, but put them in a position to survive moving forward here so that they're ready for this, right? And the way that we do that, is, in my opinion, is providing them structure. And this is why we're going to treat everything as an experiment moving forward here, right? And this is a generational thing as well. Like so I was, I'm a 47-year-old here, Gen Xer. And look, I'm glad the fact that I grew up without tech, okay? And I remember, because when I was bored in my house, right, when I was a kid, my mom would just be like, get the fuck out of the house and go play, right? And she'd be like, just be home by dinner, don't burn anything, don't break anything, that type of thing. And so I'd go burn some shit down, I'd break some stuff, right? And I'd figure it out. Now, my daughter, like I got a 12-year-old daughter. That's not the way it works anymore. Kids' lives are structured 100% of their, and think about it, like kids go to school from this hour to this hour, then they got soccer practice from this hour to this hour, then they have their iPad for 30 minutes, then they have to do their homework for 2 hours, right? And they're taught to the test, especially in the States. They're taught to the test, the MCAS, all that stuff, like you got to pass that test. So now these kids get out in the real world, and then you have assholes like me look at them and say, hey, figure it out. They look at you sideways like, what do you mean figure it out? Like, tell me what to do. And when you say that to somebody like me, the instinct is you don't know what to do? I'll tell you exactly what to do. Here's a script. Here's a template. Do it. And you give a kid who's been taught to the test and structured their entire life, you give them a template, you give them a script, they will push play on the template, they will read the script. But if you give them structure, look, I don't like being in structure. You put structure on me, I try to break it. I'm like, I don't like this. There's got to be a better way. I like building structure. Reps today, young professionals today, they need the structure. Because if they don't have it, they fall apart. And guess what? They will execute within that structure better than I ever would. So there's the connective tissue. It's not scripts, it's structure. And it's letting them play and experiment with everything. There's no more strategy right now, in my opinion. Strategy? Anybody here, can anybody honestly tell me what's going to happen in Q3 right now? Honestly, can you tell me what's going to happen in Q3? I'm convinced Skynet's going to start walking down the fucking street with robots telling us all that we need to get in cages in the next freaking 3 months, for crying out loud. Right? Seriously. So because I can't see that far out, that means we have to be as agile as you can possibly imagine right now. And we have to leverage our team to do it. I treat everything as an experiment at this point. Everything. Messaging is an experiment. You need to test messaging all the time. Because what worked now, or what worked 6 months ago, is not working right now from a messaging standpoint. You know what I mean? And it's nuanced down to the ICP, it's nuanced down to the persona, it's nuanced down to the client as far as what's working and what's not. And so giving the teams the ability to experiment within some structure is going to increase job satisfaction because you're going to let them play around. So for instance, let's section out all the aspects of the sales process. And there is a tool, let's go back. I promise you, there is a tool, there is an AI free tool, ChatGPT or whatever the fuck it is, that can do one of those things. So go assign a group of kids, hey, go figure that out this week. Go play around with this and come back to us and tell us what you think, right? And if it works, great, roll it out. If it doesn't, whatever, next week, pick something different. Messaging, let's try something different this week as a group here so we can all experiment to see what's working and what's not working and have it stop be individual reps doing their thing. Because we have to learn faster now than ever and we have to use our teams to get the data. Because I talk about split testing all the time. I always say to people like, look, if you could go back and if I could go back and tell my 22-year-old something, what would it be, right? And it's A/B split test everything you do. like everything you do, right? Say you're calling into CIOs in healthcare. Come up with 2 different messages to CIOs in healthcare. Make 20 phone calls with this approach, make 20 phone calls with that approach. See which one yields a higher response rate. Objection handling? Objection handling isn't rocket science, it's just science. Write down an objection that you're getting smoked on right now, okay? Google, best way of handling objection, right? You're gonna get some idiot like me giving some tips on how to handle a certain objection, whatever. Go find 2 that you like, because they fit your style or whatever. The next 10 times that objection comes up, deal with it this way, next 10 times deal with it that way. See which one yields a higher response rate. Think about it. If I told you to make 50 dials, and you make 50 dials in a day, and you get no meetings, it's a shitty day, right? It's a demoralizing day, right? But if I tell you to make 50 dials, and instead of making just 50 generic cold calls, make $25 with this approach and $25 with that approach to the same persona, and you still get no meetings, to me that's actually not a bad day. You know why? You just figured out 2 approaches that don't work. Tomorrow you come in and try a couple new ones. We have to get into this experimental mentality right now, because otherwise these reps are just going to fade off into the distance, because we're just going to keep treating them like robots and they're going to get replaced by robots. But if we let them experiment within some structure, we got a chance here. And that's where we can evolve. And so for me, I'll give you an example here. And if you want to take a snapshot of this is part of the training, but this is actually something I firmly believe in right now from a messaging standpoint. AI is coming up with killer messaging. But the reason that AI messaging has not nailed it yet is because it can tie my general value proposition. It can go look for triggers and all these different things and then tie my sales training value proposition to that, right? But it can't be specific with my value proposition. But there are certain parts of my value proposition that really align with certain things, but not everything. Let marketing do the whole broad base, this is all the stuff that we do. In sales, we have to throw darts. Hey, what about this, and what about that, and what about this, and what about that, right? And get them to think about stuff. And so I created this this equation here that helps people create sales-ready messaging. And then we take this sales-ready messaging, we put it into the AI to say, these are our value propositions based on personas and triggers. Now go find me those personas and triggers and write this messaging with the NLP word, right? But I'm giving it nuances of my value proposition. So for instance, persona, right? CIOs in healthcare, whatever. Now, a trigger, so open up a new office, launch a new product, whatever those things are that are specific to your business. Priority or challenge, right? So this isn't all of them, but and this is literally have the reps Google CIOs, healthcare, priorities, challenges, 2023, so they're learning some stuff. Now, what component of your solution? So for me, for instance, I do sales training, but I got 2 main programs. I got filling the funnel and driving to close. And even within those, I got messaging, email, phone, social selling, contact strategy. I got negotiations, objection handling, closing, meeting execution. I got all these little pieces, right? I also do live sessions like this, and I also got my whole online catalog of stuff. So what component of what my solution is, and how does it align with that trigger, priority, or challenge? And if they applied it, what would the result be? And you could do this for your customers, by the way. I'm encouraging, you know when you onboard customers and you got to figure out their messaging? How often does their messaging any good? When you're doing it sucks, right? Like 9 times out of 10 when you're doing an agency, they dump you over a bunch of marketing crap and it's like, what do I do with this shit, right? You can walk them through this equation. And then you can come up with messaging based on triggers or personas. VPs of sales who are going through merger and acquisition, leverage our negotiation scorecard. 2, align their new business units with common language so they can quickly. VPs of sales whose main priority is keeping the reps motivated and engaged. Now that everybody's working from home, leverage our live remote training to infuse some energy. You get these, the equation gets you about 80% of the way there. Then you can put it into like a chat GPT and normalize it a little bit if you want to. But we ingest this into the machines and you use this as a way to educate the reps along the way. Instead of just giving them the messaging, what I recommend people do is, and this is what I'll leave you with here is, and by the way, you can play around with stuff like chat GPT to automate all this stuff, right? So you write the equation to help with the business acumen part of it, and then you use ChatGPT to optimize it. And this is the bridge the gap between the 2 pieces here. So here's a recommendation I recommend it for everybody. Every company I work with, pick a persona once a month, right? Get everybody together and do 2.5 hours on the schedule the first Monday of every single month. First half hour, have the reps do some homework. They got to put in effort, right? Google, CIOs, healthcare, priority challenges, 2023, right? Learn something, read a few articles, heaven forbid. Then go get some customers who fit that profile. CIOs, healthcare, existing customers. You get them on a little Zoom session and have the reps do a Q&A with the person they're about to call, right? So that they get the empathy. They see a name to a face. It's not just a card that marketing gives them and says memorize. Then they ask, hey, what's a day in a life look like? What were you doing before our solution? What are you doing now? If somebody were to ask you what value we bring to you, what would you say? Forget about our marketing lingo, right? Whatever. And so they learn from that. And then after that, they craft messaging based on those priorities and what they're saying using this formula. You craft a 7 to 10 touch sequence that's a standard sequence. And then you break up into teams and you test variables. Team 1, it's all email. Team 2, touch 3 and 7 need to be phone. Team 3, touch 4 needs to be video. And team 4, I want you to do heavy social beforehand. And then everybody rips a list of 20 or 30 accounts that fit that profile and execute. And then you just look at the variables to see which one's working. Because people ask all the time, well, John, is video good for my industry? I don't know. It's good for mine, because I go after VPs of sales and SaaS and marketing. They love that shit. But you sell to CISOs? I doubt it. You know what I mean? Like chief of, like, what CISO in their right mind is going to look at a thumbnail on an email and go, ooh, what's behind this, thumbnail? Let me click on that and see what happens. Like, they'll get fired for even thinking of it, for crying out loud. But we can test it. And that testing gets them engaged, helps employee satisfaction, helps them develop into the reps that we need them to be moving forward here, and provides a ton of value to the client because we're actually executing at their level. And so that is where I'm leaving it, because this is what we ultimately have to be. We have to be Iron Man, Iron Woman coming out of this. It's not, because if you think of Tony Stark, right? Tony Stark is a human, he's got it all, right? He's good looking, he's rich, he's super smart, jerk, whatever. But as a human, Tony would get smoked by all the aliens out there, right? So what does he have to do? He has to create the suit. And the suit's cool, but the suit is just a chunk of metal without Jarvis. But you put the Jarvis with the suit, with the person, you can whoop some ass. And that's what we got to do right now. We have to pay attention to this stuff. And I encourage you to let your team play with all the stuff out there and come back to you with how to improve and optimize things, but give them a structure to do it. Because otherwise, we're going to lose. We're going to lose this fight. AI is coming faster than I've ever seen before out of all the innovations. And I'm old here, so I saw the internet come in, right? That was cool. Right? But there were still people playing like, oh, the internet, that's a fad, right? Nobody actually thought it was going to. And then I saw like when dial-up went to DSL, and that was a big leap, right? Because we actually could hit the internet, and that was cool. Right? And then all sorts of other evolution happened. But what I saw 3 months ago with ChatGPT, it has opened up Pandora's box, and we are not going back, and it's just going to accelerate. So I just beg you all to pay attention and empower your sales team to help you evolve, so that they and we don't get replaced here, all right? So with that, look, y'all can access any of my information. I do have some training that if anybody's interested in it, we're offering a cool stuff for CloudTest specifically, but regardless, hit me up and I'll help you out. If you want to hit me up on Instagram, that's where I do a ton of free consulting. So if you have any questions, just hit me up on Instagram. Just send me a little video. I got some OCD, so every time I see the overdue thing on Instagram, I have to clean it up. I'm also a zero inbox guy, so if you ever need to email me, I will get back to you, promise you, within 24 hours. And let's just stay on top of this. Because I don't know any more than anybody else, but I'm curious enough and I'm eager enough to figure this shit out. And that's what we got to be right now. Because if you're going to put your head in the sand right now, you might as well unplug completely and go live on a beach somewhere else and forget about this whole mess right now. But it's a fun ride for those people who are paying attention. It's a scary ride for people who aren't. All right? So with that, how much time do I have left on this? Do we have any time for Q&A or anything like that? Yeah? Anybody got any questions about any of this cool stuff that's happening right now, or any of the things that I'm seeing out there? Because it is ugly. I'm in the mess with you all, by the way. I'm selling every day, just like everybody else. Anybody got any questions on any of this stuff? Yeah. All right, you good?
I got a question.
Yeah, what's up?
In the short term for sales agencies, do you see this as being an opportunity to grab more customers?
Yep.
Or a threat?
No, I think in the very short term, I think it's a massive opportunity for agencies, because I do see companies downsizing their SDR team and going back to their AEs and saying, AEs, you now have to self-source, and none of these AEs know how to do that shit. So they're panicking right now, and I do think what's happening, this is just my opinion here, I've talked to enough of them that I'm talking to VPs of sales and even CROs, and they're all in on, because usually the idea is, when you downsize, you hold on to your core, right? So these are my core reps, like these are my top players. I wanted to keep my top players. Well, conceptually, usually in down economies, what happens is, well, now we need to invest in them. Now that we've cut everybody and we only have this group, we need to invest in them, training, tools, all that other stuff. I actually, for the past couple of months, I have not been seeing that, because what's happening is the CRO and the VP of sales are in violent agreement that they need to empower their teams, but then all of a sudden it goes to the CFO. Every decision, even if it's $5,000 these days, is going to the CFO. And the CFO, I don't know, but it feels like the CFO is sitting on their hands going, nah. Unless there's such a direct line to ROI, they're gonna, and I think the mentality is what got us into this mess, the people, the process, the tech that got us here are not gonna be the people, the product, the tech that get us out of here. So these reps that we've conditioned to be robots are not gonna be the ones that are gonna help these companies get out of this. So I think these executives are looking at it and being like, well, let's see what you can do. And if you can't do it, the market's pretty hot right now with talent or more efficient ways of doing this. And that's where I think agencies can slide right in and say, look, instead of firing everybody, just give it to us, let us run this for you, and let us do this the right way. But unless we start looking at how we can create efficiencies as agencies, that's just going to be a stepping stone to the next part of AI taking over, and Robot John's going to be doing your cold calling for you. So what's up? What's up, Steve?
We talked earlier today.
Yeah.
John and I are kind of roommates over at Amir's place, but we talked about the idea of the $1 million a year earner SDR, the growth hacker. Like, what are your thoughts on that? And are we there yet?
No, I mean, I think we can be, absolutely. I think anybody can like take a lot of these tools and start. I mean, we talked about the was it the OnlyFans or the OnlyFans girl who did an avatar of herself is getting paid $1 a minute for that stuff, and it's a full-on avatar, and she's making it rain, right? Yeah. So, and I'm even getting duped right now on AI voice recognition. Like, so, I pay attention to this shit. So I get calls every year from the firefighters or the police, you know, that type of thing, right? And they want to donate. And every year I do the same thing. And it's always some old surly guy that calls, and you can tell he's reading from a script, right? And he's like, hey, you know, would you like to, you know, blah. And every time I'm like, dude, I do this every year. I'm not going to give you my credit card over the phone. Send me mail. I will write a check for you. I just want to make sure you're legit, that type of thing. And it ends up being a cool conversation, right? Same thing happened this year, though. I get this call from this old surly guy, and he's reading his script, and I go, dude, every year, stop reading the script, just like, let's have a conversation here. He's like, oh, I'm sorry, sir, you know, we're da-da-da. And I start talking to him, and then he cuts right back into his pitch, and I'm like, dude, seriously, shut the fuck up. I'm like, just get off your script right now, talk to me like a normal human being, and we'll be good. Like, oh, sorry, sir, da-da. And then he kicks back in, and I'm like, this isn't a human. And so I started messing around with it. I'm like, so. And I'm not going to say what I started asking some really weird ass shit to see where this was going to go. But my point is think about me as like if I'm an SDR right now with Auto John Barrows, my voice, and the ability to use AI to write super hyper personalized stuff, I could be an assassin by myself, massively profitable. So yeah, I think for the ones that can pay attention, they are. But I think we're transitioning to that right now. I think we're moving into a point where we're going to get massive amounts of very highly profitable businesses with 2 or 3 people on staff at most. Mm-hmm. You're going to be able to generate $2, $3, $4, $5 million a year with 3, 4, 5 people and a whole bunch of AI. And I think the agencies that figure this out and figure out how to use the team to be able to optimize that and give them the tools to be that one to many are going to be the ones that win. So.
Got one more question
Yep.
from one of our agencies in UK, Steve
Nice.
Burden, who wants to be here for cancer. What's that mean? He
Hey,
wants
Steve.
to know, what is your most effective way for top of the funnel building your business?
It's not, there's not one effective way. It goes back to the omni-channel everything. Like that's why I post, that's why I share, that's why I call, that's why I email, that's why I do everything. So it's an orchestration of all of it, which is mind-numbing and a pain in the ass to do, but it's what you have to do. Like that's why I go back to SDRs have to have their own personal brand in some way, shape, or form. They have to be able to know how to make calls. They have to be able to know how to send emails. They have to know how to. So for me, it's everything. There's not one channel that is. I will say.
You say it's everything, but your brand, that's like your
I'd say the brand definitely puts me in a better position than most to get that, absolutely, because I still get inbounds and everything else, and people, you know, when I do call, I call into my ICP, so they usually know who I am. But that doesn't mean I'm making it rain. You know what I mean? As far as close ratios and that helps me get in the door. I still got to work about getting in the door and doing what there. But you know, I would say if I would absolutely choose one that is the highest converting is actually LinkedIn voicemails. That's my highest converting one, and it's actually more than LinkedIn video, because I think some about the voicemail. There's like some curiosity there. It's like what's he gonna say? You know what I mean? Where the video, you're like, that guy's ugly. I don't want to watch that, right? Whereas the voicemail, you're like, what the fuck? So that's the one I'm.
John, I hate to see that's one more thing. How
Yeah.
hard are phone skills moving forward?
I think they're. Well, it depends on what you mean by phone skills. Like a cold call, I think is important, because if and when you catch somebody on the phone these days, that's your chance to make an impact. And if you screw that up, you lose everything, right? I think the ability to be on the phone and engage with somebody is actually massively important moving forward. But the cold call itself, we'll see where it goes with the automation here. So.
Yeah, this is awesome, John.
Thanks.
But the two things you brought up that I think are sort of contrary, but I'm trying to like balance in my agency,
Yep.
is the structure
Yep.
that you give your team, while
Yep.
at the same time, all right, allowing them to experiment
Yep.
with AI. And so how are you thinking about giving your team structure
Yep.
to experiment with AI?
Sure.
Because I'm trying to do that, but it's like a balance that kind of conflict a little bit.
Yeah, it's almost like an agile approach where you get what's the problem and what's the outcome we're looking for. So the hypothesis is, if we found a solution to address this need, to make us more efficient in research, to make us more efficient in writing, whatever the going back to this thing is, right? Like whatever we slice this up to be, like these pieces here, whoops. So whatever you section out those, like identify whatever the problem is, right? We need to be more efficient with this thing. Okay, cool. Well, the ideal state is for it to be worth it for us to do it, we would have to increase our, efficiency by 50%, right? So now that's the outcome we're looking for. That's the problem. Now, what I want you to do is go look for the free tech that addresses those things, and I want you to set up demos or whatever it is, or just start playing around with the shit and see if we can create that level of efficiency for that outcome that we're looking for in a week, right? So it's short sprints every week, like just try something new, right? And so if you give them like the problem, the outcome, and then some guidelines of don't go down the rabbit hole, like that type of thing, right? And even block time on their calendars to do it, by the way. You know how like Google gives you 20% of your time just to play around with shit? Like that's what I would highly recommend all of us do, from, again, going back from a job satisfaction standpoint. Every Friday. You know how tech does this all the time? Tech does where everybody gets in the room and just hammers on a problem or whatever it is. It's what the fuck do they call it? Scrums, yeah, but even better, like I don't know, where everybody picks the problem and everybody goes after it for a period of time. Hackathon, yeah, the hackathons, right? I think we should bring that concept to sales. Let's do hackathons with sales. Let's pick a problem and let's see who can, Friday afternoons from 2 to 4 or 4 to whatever, we're gonna grab pizza and beer and we're gonna do a hackathon on this topic, and whoever figures out wins whatever the hell we wanna let them win, right? But that way you create this environment of like, cool, we're figuring stuff out, we're learning things, and I'm not just doing this all day, right? Because we gotta learn the skills, we gotta learn the foundation. But if we, especially with the younger generation here, if we are not letting them play with this stuff, they're gonna go find somebody else who will let them play with this stuff. Because they're playing with it anyways. Might as well do it for our benefit than anybody else's. So give them that environment. But think of what's the nuanced problem, what's the outcome, what would make it worth it to roll out whatever it is as far as percentage of, and then a little bit of a framework, and then structure time on their calendar. That's the way I would look at it. Yep. Cool. Anybody else?
I got one thing to add. You brought up the CFO. Right?
Yeah. Oh.
I just have a question for everybody here.
Kicking my
who's
ass.
An agency owner. Who here has actually tried, as an agency owner, to do a cost comparison between an in-house team and an outsourced team? You, right? Anybody else?
That's what we do it all the time.
All right. I spent a lot of time doing a spreadsheet showing people the cost, but no matter what, in their mind, there was no management hiring tools. They always compared one SDR to one Apple. And I think that the biggest opportunity now, with what John brought up, is now that the CFO is involved, now that we don't have the 10 years of growth at all costs, it doesn't matter if we're profitable. I believe that the shift to being profitable at cost is actually going to give agencies a stronger opportunity to actually not only demonstrate the fact that they're experts.
Yep.
That doesn't make sense to hire an SDR that's going to last 9 months. Like John brought up, they last 9 months. 50% don't last 12 months, right? So now I think it's a game changer, because we lived in a world where most VPs of sales didn't even know the spreadsheets, they didn't know the math, they didn't care. They cared about 15 meetings per month, right?
Yep.
Like, who heard of that before?
Yeah.
It's 15 minutes per month or you're fired, right? So I think we're in a position now where the CFO could become our friend, because they understand spreadsheets, and it might lead to longer relationships.
Yeah.
And one thing to add, I would also say that John mentioned that we might see a shift where SDR work will go under sales and marketing, right? Under marketing. And at first when I started, I was scared when I got hired by marketing, right? I remember back in the day we had like Ipswich and these teams, and I was nervous about it. But now what I realize is that if you think about it, there's been marketing agencies doing $20 million deals with Apple for 30 years, right?
Yeah.
Like those deals are actually more consistent. There's less churn. So as a sales agency owner, I would welcome the fact that you might be under the marketing umbrella. They have been working with agencies for decades. They don't think they're the best, right? You VPs of sales, I hire SDRs. I'm the best trainer. They never picked up a phone before.
Right.
So I would spin some of this to opportunity for us. And I think that's the biggest thing
Absolutely.
where, this is just an opportunity for every agency, I think, to grow stronger, become more efficient. So I wanted just to add that. John, you got 7 more minutes. Anybody have more questions for John?
Do you have one? Yeah, what's up? Yeah.
This little microphone work?
So, John, you mentioned that normally thank you. There's about a time of 10 months where reps are leaving organizations or agencies. I've experienced something similar where we're noticing that reps they're not involved, they're not engaged, and they're not necessarily committed to the big picture or the big vision of the company. A lot of the companies that I've seen are just throwing tech at this problem. Would you say that more than a tech problem, there is a leadership development gap where we're not allowing people to, get involved and really feel the fire of doing what they do?
I think, yeah, so the question for those who didn't hear it is like, is it more than just the tech? Like we throw tech at these kids and that's why they don't stay too long because they don't really get bought in, right? And there's leadership. And yes, I think it's a massive leadership problem. I think COVID is actually what woke us all up to this, right? Where all of a sudden COVID was a point where everybody kind of took a step back and started to think about what was really important to them. You know what I mean? Like driving into the office an hour and a half every day, that type of thing. Is that really quality of life here? I'd rather take less money and have a better, so I think values matter, purpose matters, all this stuff. So this is why I beg everybody, every business is, there's one thing to have a vision, right? I always say you can't get somebody to buy into, to do more than what you're asking them to do unless they buy into a vision. But if they buy into a vision, people will do 2, 3, 5 times more than what you're paying them to do because they're committed to it, right? So you got to have that. But I think what more importantly is I think the values part of this and going through that why and the values exercise and hiring on that too. Because you'll hear on Monday, by the way, I'm putting out my keynote on my podcast, and it's been the past 3 years of what I learned over going through some shit, right? And it was as soon as COVID, and then I had a good year, and then my dad died, and then that year was shit, and I really was in a weird spot. And the idea of alignment, I went back and I started really being curious about what are the characteristics of companies and people that tend to grow even through tough times, right? So continuously grow. And the themes were alignment, so why, values, priorities, and energy. Execution, they didn't stop moving. They experimented, right? Because remember COVID hit, people like, oh, I can't wait till things go back to normal. Anybody who said that, I was like, you've already lost. First of all, what is normal at this point? And second of all, what are you waiting for? You better start moving, right? And then the third was gratitude, right? But if I go back to that alignment piece, it was really clear to me the companies that held on to their employees, the ones that thrived through tough times, they were rock solid on their why, and they knew very clearly what their values were, and they hired on those values. Because if you and I share the same values, we can argue all day long, but we'll come to a point of agreement. If you and I don't have the same values, we're just going to yell at each other. That's what's happening right now in the United States, right? If you ask somebody in the United States now what's American value, you'll get vastly different answers from both sides of the equation, right? So there's no core anymore, which is why we're just yelling at each other all the time. But when you have those core values, you can do some special things. And so I think that's why if people don't feel bought in, right, they're just going to find their next. Because also think about, some of you have people in the office, and there is a bullpen here, which is great. But most of these reps, especially in California, whatever, they're all remote. So if I'm sitting in front of my computer and I'm making calls and sending emails, and this is my world, and you're going to pay me more than you are to do the exact same fucking thing? Like, why wouldn't I do that? Why wouldn't I just bounce from the next one who's going to pay me more? Especially if I'm good. You know what I mean? Like, I'll do that all day long. But if I believe in the vision, if I believe in the values of the business, I'll be bought into this, and I'll be more willing to take a little bit less or whatever it might be. So.
And you would do that because your leadership invests in you, like really invests in you. Not necessarily, for instance, coaching is a big gap that has become an event.
Yeah.
So it's just Okay. It's
Right.
really making something transcendental. I don't know if that's the right word, or something that
Yeah.
really just
Yeah, well, that's
further to the person. And for instance, the other day I was a meeting. My manager gave me feedback
Yep.
30 minutes after the meeting.
Yep.
I was so grateful.
Right.
Like, this is awesome. This is exactly how it should be.
exactly, and that's but so let's go back to Super John. That's going to be live. That's going to be live through AI, and so that's where we can increase satisfaction, but we need to be the stewards of it. You know what I mean? Let me introduce you to this new AI bot that's going to be your coach. And by the way, I'm going to take all my management knowledge and stuff it in there, and you're going to get my management knowledge and John Barrows and Sandler and whatever it is, and you're going to have, and then but then I need to stay engaged with you to see how that coaching's going, right? So we can't be removed from the equation. We have to be that last mile. But if you feel that, and this is where AI isn't going to come into play, which is I now need to know you as a person, right? So now this gets into the individual coaching, what are your goals as a human being? I've always said that my goal is to help you get, what is your definition of happiness, right? That's what I ask all my employees coming on board. What does happiness look like for you? What is your vision here? Because that's my goal. My goal is to help you achieve whatever level of happiness means to you. Right? Because that means something different to me. Success means something different to me than somebody else. But if my job is to get you there, you'll stay with me. And if you believe that, and if I show that, and if I act that way. But that's why I think it's cool where we can automate all this shit so that we can be the human that gives a shit about the kid that's coming in and shows them how to develop and gives them some of the experience that we have that maybe AI can't give them, that type of stuff, right?